Gregory the Galvanic Saint is one of the challenging tormented bosses available in Diablo 4, or at the very least challenging when you're gearing up, because later on you're pretty much going to be obliterating them instantly. And yes, I am going to be calling him Gregory throughout this video. So if you're progressing and want to learn more about this boss, I'm going to start by breaking down his key mechanics. I won't go into everything, just the most important stuff. Then I'm going to go through the fight, give you a little bit of narration. Then finally, I'm going to wrap things up with where to find him, how to farm his materials, and the loot that he drops, or at the very least, the loot that he drops at his current time. So with all that said, let's get into things. Starting with the beginning of a fight, which in many ways is the most dangerous part, because before Gregory appears, he electrifies a series of tiles on the floor, starting from the corners, then moving into the center. And what you need to do is get away from the part that's going to kill you. This hits incredibly hard, to the point where on Torment 4 it could very well be a one-shot. So on the one hand, don't feel bad if you die the first time, especially if your friend starts a fight without telling you that this is happening. Number 2, second of all, it always follows the pattern of corner, middle, center. So, as the middle lights up, you are safe in the center or the corner. The center is about to light up after that though, so you should move to the corner, thus avoiding damage. Then, after appearing in the center of a room, Gregory begins his attack sequences. Most of his basic attacks use his mace. There's either a series of strikes or one big swing, which also has considerable knockback. At the start of a fight, this knockback won't be very relevant unless you're a melee build, but later on this becomes more problematic because he activates elemental hazards around the room. One other thing to keep in mind from these melee attacks is they release sparks. The best thing to do here is simply avoid those sparks. While none of them are individually too damaging, if you get hit by a bunch, it can certainly be taxing to your defenses. Personally, I found that even though their movement's quite erratic, the best way to avoid most of them is try to always go behind the boss, because they'll generally move away from him even if they're doing so in an erratic manner. Now after that, he also uses an AoE where he slams his mace into the ground, causing a series of explosions. Observe the pattern made by the red circles on the floor, then get out of them to avoid damage. Again, this is the sort of thing where as you get more geared, it becomes less problematic, but especially on your early attempts, one of these circles is going to do considerable damage, and if multiple overlap, that could be the end of your attempt. But beyond his basic moves, Gregory has a few other mechanics that you need to keep in mind. The first is he will summon Knight's Penitent throughout the fight. Think of this as trash to kill. In this case, rather than being a hazardous mechanic, if anything, this is kind of just a buff, because you get to proc on kill effects. On the other hand, what is significantly more dangerous is when he charges the pylons around the room. You need to not touch the beams, as these do serious damage, and they stack the damage amplification mechanic. So if you get hit by a beam, you will take more damage for the rest of that attempt. Remember how I said earlier that his basic attack having a knockback is going to be relevant later because of elemental hazards around the room? Yes, this is where that comes in. So, if you are playing any sort of skill that has a movement component, you have to be careful to not move through the beams. Certain things like teleport will allow you to safely blink through them, but anything where your character moves fluidly in transit is going to be a problem. Also, be careful of your positioning. If Gregory is between you and the beam and he knocks you back, guess where you're going to go? That's right, directly into the beam. So, to avoid that, you want to position yourself where your back is not directly to the beams whenever possible, or, again, avoid his attacks, thus you don't get knocked back, / use something like Unstoppable to prevent him from knocking you back to begin with. Last up, but certainly not least, his most deadly mechanic is a transition phase that happens as his health gets lower. You can think of this as a supercharged version of the pylon move, where he teleports away, charges pylons all around a room to form a cage vastly restricting your movement, and then electrifies the floor tiles. There are 9 total tiles making up the floor of a room. 7 of them are going to be bad, 2 of them are going to be safe. So as they light up, stay as best you can towards the center of a room, watch which tiles light up, move to the safe space, avoid all the bad ones. And then, even though the tile damage will fade, you have to be really careful because it is very easy to get knocked into the charged lines so long as they persist. With that said, if you're at this point in the fight and experiencing this mechanic, there's a very good chance that it's going to be over soon. So don't panic, keep calm, do the mechanics, and you'll be good. Okay, so next up I'm going to go through an example of a fight, talk you through a little bit of what I'm doing, and a little bit of what the boss is doing. First up, and most importantly, the start where the room gets charged. What I do is I wait where the second area is going to electrify, dodge through onto the safe space, let the boss land, and then start attacking him. He uses circles, I dodge out of the way in between the overlaps, then I start moving behind him so that most of his sparks are going to miss me. Remember, a few will probably hit you, they move very erratically, but 1 or 2 spark hits isn't going to be devastating, whereas a lot of them can very much be a problem. As he gets to like 70% health, he begins charging everything around the room. And I actually do make a small mistake. I step into one of the beams, and Rahair intercepts the blow and saves me. After that, I recover, I reposition, and I kind of move back and forwards between the charged beams, avoiding mechanics as I can. In one case, I do stand in a puddle. That's not necessarily the ideal way to do it, but I knew that my character had plenty of defenses. And if you know that you can take a hit from a certain mechanic, as long as it doesn't apply a damage amp, i.e. as long as it's not for beams, you can take the hit. This lets you have better DPS uptime and lets you avoid more dangerous things. From here, it's just a matter of whittling down his health as he teleports around the room a little bit, but I know once he gets low enough, he is going to do his big power-up move. Typically that happens when he gets to around 40%, but if you happen to stun him, it might happen later. So what I do, I wait for the room to start to charge, I watch for the tiles to appear, and in this case, top left was safe, so I simply stand in the top left, I wait for the mechanic to dissipate, then I unleash all my damage on Gregory, killing him pretty darn quickly because he was very low when he started the move. Now that you know how to fight Gregory, let's talk about where to find him. Starting from Ked Bardu, head down to the Hall of the Penitent. This is basically a matter of going straight south. The road curves a little bit, so it's kind of go west and then southeast, but the end result is it's pretty much straight to the south of Ked Bardu in the Hall of the Penitent. You unlock access to the boss once you enter Torment 1, but I highly recommend that you actually farm him in Torment 3 or Torment 4 depending on what your build is capable of. Higher torments mean you're generally going to get better loot, and especially if you want a good chance at an uber unique, I guess a mythic unique now, you're going to want to be farming on those higher torments. To farm him, you're going to need a lot of materials. So how do you get the 12 living steel, or more than 12 living steel, that you need? Well, you could get it from the Crest Undercity. But what you could also do is farm Hell Tides, because living steel is one of the rewards every time you open a tortured gift. With the tortured gift of mysteries giving the most, but any old tortured gift will give you some. So go through the Helltide, maybe complete some whispers while you're at it, get some other materials for different bosses. Then from there, once you've collected 250 cinders, open the tortured gift of mysteries and get pretty much enough living steel to go take on Gregory. If you've already opened the tortured gift of mysteries, then you can open several of the other regular mystery chests to get enough to take on Gregory as well. So if you farm him, what can you expect drop-wise? Well, here's an example of what's currently available. With that said, Blizzard has liked to shift drops over time, so this may not be accurate if you're watching the video in the future. Therefore, I strongly recommend that you check out a written guide over at Maxwell GG. It'll be linked down below. That's going to be kept up to date, so even if you're watching this a few seasons from now, you can find the loot that you're looking for. So those are the key mechanics for Gregory the Galvanic Saint, a little bit on how to fight him, where he's located, what materials to gather, and of course, a little bit of info on his loot. Now, if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe you want some more boss guides, then check out some of my other videos that'll be up in the card and down below on how to defeat the other tormented bosses in Diablo 4. As of recording of this video, Varshan will be out, but some of the rest won't. So if you want to know how to defeat any of the other bosses, do be sure to get subscribed, maybe leave a like while you're down there, and ring that notification bell so you can see whenever there's a new upload. And hey, if you want something to watch after this, maybe check out that Varshan guide, because if you're fighting Gregory, you're probably going to be fighting him as well. But that's about it for me today. Before I go though, I'm curious, what do you think of elemental hazards or hazards in general on a fight? Personally, I kind of like how they're done on Gregory. It restricts the space and forces you to think a little bit differently, i.e. not get knocked back into the lines, but it doesn't feel super punishing, at least not most of the time. Whereas the elemental puddles on, say, Duriel, those are a bit more of an annoyance that I could probably do without, especially since sometimes they blend into the floor and you step in them without realizing. But hey, I'm curious about some of your thoughts on elemental hazards, so I'll leave them down in the comments below. For now, thank you for watching to the end. I'm glad you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.